hours, just in case we need to.
Wow.
All right. We're live. Yay.
Yay! Oh, it's fantastic.
It's buffering terribly for myself, which is great considering I'm on my same network, but hopefully other people can see it.
I did get the notification that it just went live.
Oh, good. Does that mean you hit the bell whenever I post?
Yeah.
Oh. I'm so touched. I have some people, that like pop into my chat like the second I go live, and I like never thought about that it was probably because they hit the bell, and then I thought about it, and I was like, oh, I feel so loved. All right, so I'm just trying to make it so I can see the chat really quickly. Oh, Judith is here. Hi, Judith. Judith is a very good friend of mine. She's the absolute best. And she's always one of those people that's like right there the second I start live streaming. Okay. Yeah. So today we are going to just be chatting for a bit, like 15, 30 minutes, just about our experience with Artemis Fowl and etc. So should I start?
Yeah, you're the host. Go for it.
Okay. So I guess I'll just start with like how old I was when I first read them and how many of them I've read and etc. So I was 12 when I first read this series. My brother really wanted me to read it, and I really wanted him to read one of my favorite series. So we did like a little like bet exchange thing that like we would do that. So he ended up having me read the first Artemis Fowl book, and then I had him read all 4 books in the Enchanted Forest Chronicles because I'm extra. Oh, is Kara not in here anymore?
Did she get kicked out?
Oh gosh. Oh. Well, I hope she can join back in. Oh, here she is. Okay. So.
Oh, okay, good.
That was like my experience, like reading them for the first time, and I read the first book, and I really didn't like it at all. I read it, and I thought it was like super weird. I think I was just like too used to like high fantasy and stuff like that. So like this like modern, like almost like tech and like based modern fantasy was just like way too much for my very like I don't know. I was kind of a horrible child, and I think that just kind of like laid into it where it's like I thought I knew the answers to everything. So if it wasn't exactly how I was used to, then it was bad, which is like a horrible way to look at the world. But I did it up until I was like a little bit older. Like it took a few years, but I feel like an open-minded person. But I read the first book and I didn't like it, but then I was at the library and I actually physically read it too, even though I'm mostly an audio consumer. I physically read it, which is different as well. But I read the first book, and then I was at the library and I was like, the second book was there and nothing else. Like they had the second book on audio as well. And there's like nothing else there that like was calling to me at the moment. I'm like, I'll try book 2. So I tried book 2. And I really didn't like it. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't like the first book or the second book. And I was just like, I don't know. And then, like, book 3 was there. And I was like, okay. I went to the library, like, once or twice a week till I was, like, 15. Like, I lived at the library. So I was like, I guess I'll try book 3. And then I read book 3 and I loved it. And I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the world and the writing. I really liked the audiobook narrator. And I just kind of like, it just like snowballed. And I read all 6 of them that were out at the time. And like got my mom to read them with me. We used to take a ton of like really long, like 7, 8, 10-hour car trips together, just her and I. So we listened to Harry Potter a lot. And then when I fell in love with Artemis Fowl, we listened to Artemis Fowl a lot together. And then we listened to the 7th one together when it came out. So I've reread the whole series up to number 6, probably like 3 or 4 times. And then number 7, I've actually only read that one time. And then when book 8 came out, I actually physically bought it like from Barnes and Noble, and I never read it. Yeah, I don't know. I got in like a really big like reading slump when I was like in high school. When I was like 15 to like 17, like right pretty much until I turned 18, I only reread books, except for books I had to read for school. So like I read like a lot of classics. I read like The Once a Future Keen for school, and like the Odyssey and the Iliad and the Aeneid and like all these things that I didn't actually pleasure read except for rereads. So I never actually ended up getting to the 8th book. And then I wanted to reread the full series, and I've tried a couple times, but like I've always like petered off. There's a moment in the 4th book that I really don't like. So I think when I get to the 4th book, I just like, I'm like, I want to read it.
Yeah.
So, I don't, and I don't really like the 5th book very much either. And so like I kind of have to like push myself past that moment in the 4th book and almost the entirety of the 5th book to get to the 6th book, which I really love. And the 7th one I thought was so great when I listened to it. So I'm pretty sure I'll love it again. So that's my experience reading them and where I'm at. So I'm excited to reread them though. Very excited. Okay, who's next? Oh, and Judith said that she read the 1st book for 7th grade English, and she read the 2nd but never finished the series, even though she really liked them. So she's definitely going to be reading them with us this year.
Oh wow, that's awesome to read it for class.
Yeah, I'll actually go next, because if that's okay with Taylor, because I have something kind of related. So I think we did the 1st book for Read Aloud when I was in, I think, 4th or 5th grade, and I remember enjoying it, but for some reason I didn't think to like seek out the rest of the series. I was just like, oh, that was fun. And then I ended up seeing it later at our library or maybe like a bookstore or something. And I was like, oh, I remember enjoying that. So I got the 1st book and I reread it. And I'm like, yeah, I like this even more than I thought I did. And then I got the 2nd book, and I basically just like, I didn't really have an adjustment period. I was like, I love this. Like, this is one of my new favorite series now. So I was pretty much like on board for it from then on. And I kind of did the same thing. I like made people read it. Like I made my brother and sister read it. We actually got my dad to read them later too. I think at this point the only person who hasn't read them in my family is my mother. But yeah, like I really enjoyed them. And I think like we were talking a little bit about this before, but I think it was kind of like a formative series for me. Like I remember waiting anxiously for the next books to come out from like the 5th onward, I think, is when I was really like anticipating them. It was kind of like Harry Potter for me. And I'm pretty sure the last Artemis Fowl book came out after the last Harry Potter book. Like I'm pretty sure. So like that was kind of the series that like could tide me over after Harry Potter was over, and I was like mourning Harry Potter being done. It was kind of like Artemis Fowl was one of the other series that like really was one of the first ones that I like actually anticipated and had me like paying attention to when the next books would come out. Yeah, and actually the 3rd book I think is my favorite too, but I also really enjoy the 7th one. And I remember when that one came out, it got a lot of bad reviews, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm pretty much looking forward to rereading the whole series, because I reread it a lot of times, but I don't think I've only read the last book twice. And I don't think the 6th and 7th ones, I don't think I've reread those nearly as many times as the others, because those are like really stressful books for me to read. Like I enjoy them a lot, but like
the 6th
stress
one.
me out. Yeah.
The 6th
yeah, like
one
I
is one of my favorites.
It's kind of what?
The 6th one is one of my favorites.
Well, like I love it, but it upsets me deeply. So I always have to like work up the courage to reread that one. So like I'm excited to go the whole way through the series this time and like be able to talk about it with people. So that's kind of my Artemis Fowl journey.
The time paradox stresses you out?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we're gonna have to talk about this after.
Yeah, we are.
I just remember I felt super, super gratified when I read the 6th one, because I was like, I knew how this series was, how this was gonna go. So
yeah, I know the parts you're talking about, and like I felt the same, but there's other parts about it. Taylor, go ahead now.
Fair enough.
Okay, so unlike you guys, I don't exactly remember how I started reading the series why I started reading the series. I just remember reading the first book, and I don't know how I came across it, so I'm going to assume I found it in the library and read it. It's interesting because it's also very formative for me because I read it before Harry Potter, and it really got me into urban fantasy rather than high fantasy. So I know I read the first book, loved it. Second book, I thought the second book was okay. Third book, excellent. And I read the fourth and fifth, and I have almost no memory of what happened in the books. And I never read any more after that because I had moved into my Harry Potter stage, then my Twilight stage, my Jane Austen stage, and I hadn't looked back. So I am really excited to get to the first book. As far as rereading, I don't think I ever reread the series. I would go back and flip through books 1 through 3 to find the butler parts because he was my favorite character. I wouldn't read any of the other parts.
That's amazing.
That's my history.
That's great.
I feel like I would do the same thing, but with like all the like Artemis and Holly moments. I was like, yes, their friendship. I love watching it develop because
I know
it's a very interesting series because it is like fantasy, but it also like has like stuff that you might normally see in like science fiction books mixed in, and so like there are like a lot of times there's a lot of like character progression and regression and progression of regression because like different timelines and random things, and it's just like it's really interesting because you get to see certain character developments like 4 or 5 times, and each time they develop differently as well, so it's like a super interesting character story. So
yeah, and I was reading this series at a time when I thought I hated science fiction. Like for a long time, like for a really long time, I thought I could only like SFF. I was like, fantasy is the only part I'm interested in. So it's really weird that like it never occurred to me. It's like I'm reading science fiction now, but I guess because there were fairies in it, I was like, it's fine. It's still fantasy. Like I don't need to worry about my like fantasy reader identity or something. Yeah, but I really like the crossover genre thing. Like I really enjoy that, and it's not something I would have thought to seek out because again, for a long time I thought I hated science fiction, but I think it's the way it blends those is really good, and I think that it can make it appeal to a lot of different kinds of readers. Like I think it's a good way to kind of dip your toes into either fantasy or urban fantasy or science fiction or like anything like that.
It's very much like a bridge series between all the different genres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I remember before I read Artemis Fowl, I was reading the Animorph series, which is hardcore science fiction. And it was like a good bridge because I didn't really read fantasy. So I went from Animorphs to Artemis Fowl to Harry Potter. So
yeah.
I've never actually read an Animorphs book. I just always saw them. I think my mom didn't want me to read them, so I'd like see them and she was like, don't read those. They're not good.
Okay, I will say they are excellent, but they are definitely not for children. They're excellent.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading like a few of them, but I must have read them out of order, which is weird because I never do that with series. But I guess with those, I was reading them pretty young, so I guess I don't know if I didn't know like what to do with a series of books, but I know that I think my brother read most of that series, and I remember him being really upset about the way it ended. And that kind of like put me off reading it because I was like, I don't know if I want to go through that. Yeah. Oh, and then do we also want to talk about for Artemis Fowl some of the things we mentioned when we were like getting the setup and everything about kind of like why we love the series or like what it means to us? Like we talked a little bit about it as we like got started, but I don't know if you guys want to elaborate on any of that.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with Taylor since she went last?
Yeah, I was thinking.
Oh goodness. Okay.
You're on the spot, Taylor.
I would say that Artemis Fowl is very influential to the types of books I like now. I always say I'm a hardcore fantasy reader, but I tend to lean more towards urban fantasy. Jim Butcher's Dresden Files, I think, it's very similar to Artemis Fowl. I love a lot of Guillermo del Toro films, and I feel like Artemis Fowl kind of gave me that sort of foundation. for loving it. And like I said earlier, Butler is my favorite character, and I had such a crush on him when I was younger. So he played a big role in the types of fictional men that I have been to like.
Okay. I guess I'll go ahead and go next. So elaborating on our earlier conversation, I feel like Artemis Fowl was really a formative series for me in terms of villains and character development, because like to see Artemis change and develop and grow so much over 8 books, and as Giselle pointed out, like it's sometimes not linear, which is really cool, but you always feel like it always felt like it made sense. And I really loved that. And I think that was one of the first series I read where the way I felt about characters in the beginning is not how I felt about them later on. So I think that was like a really big thing for me. And I think it really kind of solidified my love of like anti-heroes becoming heroes, or like character development, like really interesting and exciting character arcs overall. I think that was a series that really did that for me. Not to mention, when I was little, I had like the biggest crush on Artemis. Like I was in love with him. So like the whole like falling for the villains thing, I think that's where it started. And another thing was Holly Short. Like I love Holly so much. And I'm really glad that I was exposed to her character at a pretty young age. Because when I was reading, it didn't occur to me to be like, oh wow, it's so great that we have this really strong and clever female character who's also allowed to be really emotional and to care about people and to care about things, and it's seen as a good thing. Like I was little, so I didn't realize that's something that doesn't happen all the time. So it's only like later that I can kind of appreciate how much of a well-rounded character she is. And we get some more female characters later, like Juliet ends up I end up really liking her too, even though we don't see her too much in the first couple of books. But I just think the characters of that series overall had a really big impact on me, and then how I like to read, and like how I like certain characters I like, and allowing characters to change, I think. So yeah.
Yeah.
I love Juliet. She's amazing.
She's great. She's
The whole Butler family.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know, for me, I don't know. The way I grew up, it was very, I don't know. I was a very judgmental little like brat growing up. So I feel like this series like did help me push me out of that, because it was like out of my comfort zone. And so many of the books I was reading at the time, which like I really loved and are still some of my favorites, are very like black and white. Like these characters are good and these characters are bad, and like period. And there's maybe like a tiny bit of crossover or not. And like I feel like this Artemis is a very like morally gray character, and he's like doing terrible things, but is it for a good reason and stuff? And so like I think like getting exposed to something like that at the age of like 11 or 12 when I was like really helpful for me to like become like a more open reader, and like starting to like dip my toes out. And like I guess again the same thing, I was like, I'm a fantasy reader, I don't like science fiction and stuff. And now I mean, I think I read 11 science fiction books this year. Like, it's not like I'm the biggest science fiction reader ever, where I read like 130 fantasy books versus like 11 science fiction. It's like I'm still a big science fiction reader, but this is like definitely one of those ones that made me like realize like, oh, can be really cool to like bridge that gap a bit. And I actually put on my list to read. I'm doing like a fantasy book bingo with just like for myself that I made up this year, and like one of the like things is like one of the prompts is like tech fantasy, which isn't something I feel like I've seen really anywhere else like this. And then I feel like steampunk could technically work for that, but like where else do you see like super like high tech fairies like living among humans and you don't even know, and they're just like so much smarter and better than us? I don't know. I just feel like it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And Owen Colfer like really talks about like environmentalism a lot in it as well, which is something I feel like I didn't get super exposed to in all my fantasy books, because there wasn't any. There was just this made up world. And so like getting exposed to something like that, where like these people are doing these things and we need to protect our planet and stuff, is like also a good thing to be aware of, and something that you don't see in like kids lit very often. So I don't know, there's just like a lot of things, but the characters also. I love the characters so much. I don't think there's any characters in this series that I don't love. Like, even characters that you are supposed to hate because they're like villains and stuff. Like, I don't know, is it too spoilery to say names? Like Opal, who's like a pretty terrible character and does like really terrible things and is like psychotic, is still a super interesting character that I really love reading about and stuff. So, whereas like I feel like in other books sometimes, like as a kid, it was like when you read about the villain, you're just like you don't like care.
Yeah.
Oh, it makes me care. Another question that another question that I had is, have you either of you ever read any other of Owen's books before?
No, I haven't. I didn't even know he wrote other books until maybe 2 months ago.
I have, actually. I remember, I think this was probably during a period where I was waiting for a new Artemis Fowl book to come out. So I was like, well, I'll find something else he wrote. And I read The Wish List by him, which I remember liking. But I also remember feeling like I don't necessarily want to read that one again anytime soon. But I did enjoy it at the time. But the one that I read from him that I did actually really enjoy is Airman. Is that what it's called? That's kind of, it's like sort of steampunk-ish. I think it's called Airman. Yeah, and that was sort of, it almost felt like historical fiction, but like with a little bit of steampunk, which I enjoyed. And I was just kind of getting into historical fiction and realizing I really enjoyed that. So I did really like that one. I do like his writing overall, but Artemis Fowl is definitely my favorite thing that I've read from him.
What about you?
Sorry, what were we gonna say?
Oh, I was just asking if you've read any of his other books.
I have read The Wish List, and I feel like one of the CDs from the library was like corrupted, so I definitely missed a good chunk of that book. Like probably a whole like fourth of that book, or fifth or sixth of the book, like a big chunk I missed. So like I don't know if my thoughts on it are like super. It's like about like a devil that has to go like grant a guy wishes or whatever. It's like a really weird book for like a kid's book or a young adult book or whatever. So I don't like super remember it. And then I read part of Airman. I was just curious because he wrote like the Warp series. And I was wondering, like, after Artemis Fowl, I wondered if like either of you had like delved into that at all, because I've never even like touched it.
No, I just like the whole reason he wrote other books was I found one of the Warp series books at one of my used bookstores that I go to. So I don't know if that's like a sequel or some sort of tie-in to the Artemis Fowl series, or if it's completely separate.
I don't think it is, but Artemis Fowl does have a new Artemis. Owen Colfer does have a new Artemis Fowl series coming out starting in 2020.
We can't talk about because of spoilers. But
don't look up the title because of spoilers. But
if you guys haven't read the series,
if you haven't read back past like what, book 6, it spoils.
Yeah,
is it book 6, 5,
yeah,
5 or 6.
So
yeah, definitely. But I was just wondering because I know, like, I don't know. I guess for me as a kid, especially, like, I have a lot of authors that I really love, but I would only like read one series by them and love that, and then I wouldn't read anything else by them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How I did.
It just says 2020 for the release date, so I have no idea. But don't look it up.
Well, now you told me to look it up. I'm going to go and look it up as soon as
I mean, I don't think it's like the hugest spoiler ever. Maybe, I mean, after book 2, it's like not like that shocking. I feel like
right, like it's not
really?
like it's not like gonna ruin the series for you, but I just think it's something that it was surprising, kind of. So
okay,
different for book 6, definitely.
Yeah, I'll have a lot
5 and 6. Now I remember.
I'll have a lot of thoughts on it when we get to that one.
It says expected publication February 1st, 2020.
Okay, I just looked it up. I don't remember if this is a spoiler for me or not. I think it isn't. For me.
Well, if you've read the 5th one, then probably not. But
Yeah, I've read the 5th one. I don't remember much of it, so.
I really hate the 5th book, man. I am not looking forward to reading that. I remember the last time I read it, I literally skipped like 150 pages of it. I was just like, nope, and like went to the end. I was just like, I can't. Emotionally, I can't read the 5th book right now.
Which is weird because I've heard, like, I've had a couple friends who have said that they didn't read the series, but they like randomly found the 5th book and they picked it up and read it, and they were like, I was kind of confused, but like I enjoyed it. So it's it's weird that like that seems to be one of the ones that people enjoy. But I have
That's so random.
like I feel very mixed about that book overall because there are some things I really love about it and there's some things that I really hate, and like I'm always tempted to skip. But it's still worth reading, you guys. Don't skip the 5th book.
No, don't. And it's maybe as like being a lot more like feminist and conscious than I was when I was like 14 the last time I read it or whatever. Like maybe I'll like appreciate some of the new characters that were introduced more.
Well, and I've read that one. I've reread that one before when I was older, so I don't necessarily think my opinion's going to change that much, but I will be interested to see what other people think about it.
Definitely.
I feel like half of this introductory video is just going to be us alluding to things in later books. Wait till you get here.
Oh, I meant to say, I forgot to do this before we started the hangout. It's all your fault, Kara. She like her computer like had issues for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, the preliminary thing was working fine, and then as soon as we tried to do the real one, it was like, just kidding.
When is the next live show going to be? We should decide a date for that right now so that people will know.
Okay.
Let me open up Google calendars for myself really quickly. Sorry. A date and a time for people. We're super professional. Do we want to do Sundays or do we want to do like weeknights?
Sundays are better for me.
Yeah, I would say Sunday works a little better for me.
Okay, should we do the first Sunday in February then? Would that work for people? Or should we do the Sunday in January?
Is that the 3rd, right?
Yeah, the 3rd of February or the 27th of January.
Both work for me.
I think, let's see. I think either of those could work. I do wonder if maybe February would be better just because I don't know like how close to the end of the month people are going to be finishing the book.
Same.
It's true.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So the 3rd?
Okay. And should we do it at 5 EST again?
Yeah. I think that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if there's ever any update to the time or anything, we'll like put it on the Twitter page and everything. So
yes, absolutely. In the description below there's all of our channels, well not my channel, but everyone else's channels, Twitters, all of our Twitters, and the Artemis Fowl Twitter. So you follow that. It's Artemis Fowl Read, and you can tweet Artemis Fowl Readalong for you can like hashtag that or put it in your videos on YouTube, and we will be searching that and watching them and seeing you guys read them.
Yeah.
And they're very short, especially the first like 3 are super duper short. So
yeah, they really are. They're quick reads. And I think as far as Twitter, I think the best way to get us to see stuff is to @ the official Twitter account. Like the hashtags are fine too, but like if you really want to guarantee that we'll see it, like we'll get a notification and everything, I would do the @ the account. Yeah.
All right. Any more thoughts?
I mean, we could talk quickly about the movie or our thoughts on seeing the movies.
Yeah. That thing.
If you want to end on that high note.
Right.
So I guess I'll go first because I think I have the most like different opinion out of you two. I don't want to see the movie. I guess I'll wait for it to come out, see if Kara and Taylor like it, and then judge off of that. But as of seeing that trailer, I just think it doesn't look great. It looks really campy and weird. I don't know. Like even just like it's just like the coloring and the tonal of it just doesn't seem to like match with the series. And like even like a very important like scene right at the beginning of the book that like is like the kickoff for the series, you can see that they've changed it. And I'm like, well, why do I want to watch this if you've already changed it from scene to... That's literally the first... I mean, it's one big long scene, but it's technically the first scene of the movie or of the book. Like, why would you change that? Like, why would I want to watch your thing if you've changed it and ruined it? So I don't really care about seeing it, but both of you are interested in it, right?
Yeah. I definitely plan on going to see it. I will say that the trailer got me excited about seeing the movie. Like, it did get me to, like, I don't know, start anticipating it more. But I also am not thrilled that they've already made some, like, big changes for apparently no reason. And there's also some, like, weird casting stuff, too, that I'm, like, not thrilled about. So I think I'm gonna go see it just because I've been literally waiting for this movie since 2004 is when they first announced it, that like the rights had been sold. So I've been waiting a long time. So I'm definitely gonna see it, but I'm gonna try and go in like, I hope it's not as bad as the Percy Jackson movies were. But I'm gonna try to like prepare myself for the worst. But I don't know. This could go either way for me. Like, I'm a little nervous, but I do want to see it because I'm excited that we're finally getting a movie. I guess that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm like going to go into it trying to keep an open mind, but my biggest thing is Kenneth Branagh is directing it, and I like him when he's doing Shakespeare, but when he's trying to do things that are fun, like Thor, they end up being Shakespearean. Like, I don't get how he made the first two Thor movies, which are basically Vikings in space, so boring. So I'm a bit nervous for him taking on what is essentially... Artemis Fowl has a lot of really comedic and lighthearted moments despite, you know, some of the dark themes in it. And I don't think he can tackle it well. I much would have preferred if Guillermo del Toro directed it because he would have gotten really awesome practical effects. I don't know if you guys or if anyone watching is familiar with the Hellboy movies or Pan's Labyrinth, but, you know, he does really well with practical effects and sort of, you know, unusual looking monsters and fairies. And I think he would have done a much better job handling this film than Kenneth Branagh is. But I'm going to watch it because I think if anything, I'll have something to complain about. So
right, yeah, it's like there's definitely going to be a lot to talk about with it. And I'm also...
Maybe I'd watch it if Kenneth was in it.
Right. I do like some of the casting choices they've made. Some of them I'm not thrilled about. But another thing about like the movie announcement. Do you guys remember when the casting notice was published? And they were talking about what they're looking for from Artemis, like the actor playing Artemis. And it's like, he's just got this like fun-loving like personality. And he's so happy about life. And I'm like, what?
I didn't hear about that. What?
It was wild. I thought it was a joke at first. And I don't know if like they might have gone away from that. Like that might have been like the first version of their casting call. And I'm hoping it was because I mean, the trailer didn't look like they cast him like that, but I was like, this makes me nervous. Like, this is not like
your casting call. Like,
I don't know. I'm hoping it was just like a preliminary, like first draft kind of thing, and then they realized that wasn't gonna work. But it'll be interesting.
In the first book, he literally like ends up like making a joke like halfway through the first book, and he's like, "I just made a joke that's really weird." He's like, yeah, I shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, like, so it'll be an experience.
I'm also nervous about the Butler casting because I like the actor, but because my heart is so close to Butler, I was thinking more like The Rock could play him or, you know, Jason Momoa.
Yeah.
But that's just me being selfish.
I feel like that'd be a little weird though. Like,
oh, it would be weird.
I mean, like, I'm not saying it wouldn't be weird. I'm just saying I'd be into it.
I mean, as someone who doesn't see like movies or stuff very often, like I know who this actor is still. Like I've seen him in at least one or two things, and when I saw his face, I was like, "Oh yeah, I recognize your face." Like I can see him doing a good job, and I think it's really cool that they made Butler like a person of color because I don't think that's ever like said in the books that he is.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
it?
they're described. Him and Juliet are described as Eurasian.
Okay.
Yeah.
It can mean a lot of different things. Like it can mean they're biracial, or it could mean, I think it could even mean that they're like Slavic, like Russia. There's like a lot of ways
That's
they
what
could
I
interpret
thought, like
that.
Eastern European.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking as well. And that's not the direction they went in. But I think what Kara was talking about with like her unhappy casting choices would be like whitewashing Holly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, I can understand maybe why they did it if they're planning on making like the full movie series, like all 8 books or whatever. But Holly looks just like a baby.
She does.
They aged her down because they were like, we want Artemis and Holly to be friends and be the same age, which
Right.
I get, but you have a kid cop. Like, I don't get why they would do that.
Kid cop. Yeah. Well, and like she's definitely like in human years, I definitely remember that she's still pretty young, but like she's been to a police academy. So she's like
I think in
I don't know.
human years, she's like 80 years old in human
Right.
years.
And like in human years, I think they said she was like
Or
20 maybe?
yeah, she's like around
Yeah.
20. So she's like
Which,
80
like,
years
is-
old.
Yeah, which is still young, but like also that's still believable that like you could have gone through like training for something. Cause like, I mean, I'm kind of picturing it like the military where you start like right after high school.
Yeah.
But yeah, like she looks so young.
She looks like she's like 12.
Yeah. And I don't understand why they're, because I hope I hope the movie's good and I hope they do continue to make them. So I don't know why you would start off by like alienating some of your fans. Like,
Yeah.
with really obvious things like that in the trailer. So, I mean, Holly wasn't even in the trailer, was she?
I don't remember her.
And she's like the other lead. Like the books are Artemis Fowl, but like Holly's the other main character.
Yeah. One other thing I
Yeah.
want to say is like, I don't know, like as a kid, I remember like looking up and seeing if there was going to be a movie adaptation and stuff, because that was like rumored like about 10 years ago that there was going to be a movie adaptation, and it was like really like big and like fan driven, and there was like all those like YouTube like fan casted ones and stuff. I remember looking at it, but even then I was thinking like, how are they possibly going to make this movie like visually appealing with the way some of the characters function? So maybe we can talk about that more after the first book about what I'm talking about. But like, I'm very hesitant to see how they do that as well, because either they follow their book accurate and they make it totally like disgusting, or they change it and are inaccurate and therefore like let in this world that Clover has created. So
yeah, that's something else to consider.
Yeah. On that cheerful note, is there anything else we wanted to talk about? I think
that's it. So live stream in 1 month on the 3rd of February. We'll do our live stream talking about the first book, our thoughts and feelings and everything on them. And that will be at 5 p.m. EST. I'm not sure who's on channel. We'll talk about that, but whose channel it's on. But just subscribe to all of us so you won't miss it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Well,
thanks for setting it up, Giselle.
It was such a mess. Hopefully we'll do better next week.
We'll get better every time. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for being here, Judith and Elizabeth, if you're still here. And we'll see you in a month.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys. I'm going to go ahead and hang up now.